It's a very good afternoon to the United Rugby Fans podcast show, to Nate Reynolds over there in beautiful County Clare in Ireland. Nate, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mark. How you doing? Thanks for having me. It's a big honor. So, yeah, thanks a lot. Great to be here.
No, the honour's all mine. I love talking to rugby fans across the world. And the show today is going to be all about Irish rugby, from your roots right through to the team's performance against South Africa. We've got to talk about that game because I'm sure lots of people are going to tune in wanting to listen to that game. But why don't we start off talking about your journey with the beautiful game of rugby? How old were you when you first got connected to our beautiful game, and how did that happen?
Yeah, I suppose it was kind of growing up, really. I mean, the Six Nations, it's like it's always in the background on Irish television sets, from far back as I can remember. I think it was the 2003 Six Nations that was first kind of like, whoa, the sport is incredible. The sport is really fast. What's going on? What are the rules? And this is back, when Brian O'Driscoll is playing, Paul O'Connell, Ronan O'Gara, the real legends, real guys that just stand the test of time. So kind of started there, and then, kept watching, just wasn't even really aware of the internationals, but just the Six Nations. And then eventually I was really hooked on Nintendo bad, and my dad was like, you got to get out of the house. So I had to pick a sport, and I was like, all right, let's do rugby. So I played rugby for a couple of years. I was a right winger for Ennis. That's the town I'm from. And loved it, but really kind of wasn't in love with rugby. It was just like, okay, this is good. I'm getting fresh air. And then just kind of tried, other sports like hurling, or, that's the Irish sport here, hurling, or football. So it was just kind of slipped in, then it was gone again. So in terms of playing the sport, that was like the full exposure I had. And then after that, it was kind of just up and down. It wasn't like love at first sight as a sport. It would be kind of just every few years, be like, oh yeah, the Six Nations is on. Let's watch the Six Nations. And then really, I suppose, at one stage, I was living in South Korea. I was teaching English, and all the expats, they really kind of band together. So I started hanging out with loads of Kiwis, loads of South Africans, and then, really getting the lore of rugby, the history of rugby, the World Cups. And, it was like this bonding thing where we'd watch, the Six Nations, the internationals, the summer internationals, the autumns, all that stuff, the World Cup itself. So it became this huge kind of running theme, a big party night when those games were on. So it was just a great way to break the ice with all these random expats, get talking about rugby, and, just making this lovely kind of like expat brotherhood of enjoying the sport. So, yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Okay, let's go back to your playing days, because I'm sure there's lots to explore there. When you first started playing the game, did you enjoy immediately the team environment? Was it something that drew you into the game?
Oh no, I was terrible. I think, I was there with a lot of people that, absolutely love rugby, even from the age of like 15 or 16. And I was a bit of like, kind of like this, just a tall nerd that was just kind of like, okay, how do you play? Now, they were really nice to me. They were like, okay, let's just give them a chance, and, let's show them the ropes a bit. And, but I mean, I was just, I guess, really fast. So they put me on the wing, but like, I still didn't even understand, I knew to throw backwards, but like the set pieces, things like that, I was not au fait with at all. Mm-hmm. Just running drills, I would get mixed up all the time. It was a struggle, it was just bouncing off stuff, I'd be coming over rucks and really making illegal moves. And, my dad would be like, yeah, it was illegal, but you look great doing it, he was just happy that I'm breaking sweat. Right. So, but it was still, don't regret it at all. I was delighted. Looking back, I do regret. I was like, God, I wish I'd done more years doing it. I've done tag rugby in the last few years. That's kind of just because my back isn't what it used to be, but I love doing tag rugby. Was doing that with the work gang. Yeah. That's really popular in Galway. It's this club called the Corinthians, and it's just really a big meet and greet, and with tag rugby in the background, but that's a lot of fun too.
So your dad's a big rugby man. Was that part of the push to get you into the game? Was he an inspiration behind that?
No, I'd probably be telling him about rugby, but he does like it. He loves the hype about the big games. I suppose he was always interested in it. Definitely doesn't love it as much as I do, but he still loves getting the updates, seeing how Ireland are doing, how they're getting on with the rankings, what's going on with the World Cup draw. I translate for him, I suppose. I kind of sift through all the content and give him the best bits. But yeah, he's still a fan, of course.
Yeah, brilliant. So when you started off and you were playing, were there any kind of crystal ball ambitions to, I want to play for Ireland one day? Was there anything that in the back of the head?
No, even back then, I was not clued in at all at even club rugby. I knew nothing about Munster, being from Clare
Hmm.
and, very close to Limerick. Limerick is only down the road from us. It's about an hour drive. And the lore, the history there for Munster, I had no idea. It was only until, I suppose, the last 5 years I really got to grips with all that content. So, at the time, I had no idea just how big a legacy Munster had, what a big deal they were, because this was back in, the 2000s, and they were doing all kinds of things, had a lot of famous players there. So, no, I was still very in the dark at that stage.
Well, I'm a Kiwi, as you know, and we've got a very long history with Munster for obvious reasons, which we're not too proud
Yeah.
of. So we remember getting beaten by those guys over there, and that's part of our history that we have to live with. So tell us about going to Korea and connecting with the rugby fraternity over there. How did all that come about?
Yeah, it was just it was one of my birthdays, and it was the 2014 Six Nations, and it was the game between Ireland and France, and Ireland won by 2 points. It's a
Uh-huh.
cracker of a game, and it was just blind luck that it coincided with the birthday, and all these expats were there, and a few of them I knew, and they all had like their Irish flags, and I kind of like whacked myself in the forehead, going, "Oh yeah, the game's on tonight." So that's when I kind of started hanging out with these Canadians. They were kind of fifth, sixth generation Irish, and they're absolutely, obsessed with the game. So I was just like, okay, this is a really good bus to hop on right now. And, kind of they were explaining to me the mechanics of the game, the history of Ireland. They were more in tune with than I was. I was like, oh my God, I really got to catch up here.
Mhm.
So we just started, making sure I was making all the games, just having a lot of conversations about the rules, how the rules change, how the rules are crazy. And then, of course, we had a lot of South Africans in the group. They are just, on a whole other level.
Yeah.
Not too many Kiwis at the time, but the South Africans, oh my God, they loved they loved the rugby, and they were great. We were really lucky. The guys in our group, they just loved the sport.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be militant about the allegiances. I'm sure, the World Cup brings
Mm.
out the worst in everyone that way, but they were just really for the crack, having the good fun, having the crack, and enjoying the rivalries. Because even at that time, our Irish rugby was slowly changing. We had Joe Schmidt at the helm, and we really looked, for the first time in a long time, just really, exciting, and just like, okay, there's something being built here. This is the start of something really good.
I'm upset with a number of our fellow Kiwis, because we lost Joe Schmidt to Ireland, of course, and we lost Tony Brown to South Africa now. And in the meantime, we're going down the drain as far as our performances go, and we're helping all these other countries around. Yeah.
I don't think so. I think New Zealand's fine. I think, you lose one game and all hell breaks loose. That's just another walk in the park for Irish fans. We've come across a lot of losses in the past. It's not as alarming, but I think, even to think about it now, it's really only the England game that I can remember New Zealand losing kind of more convincingly. And I think
Mm.
England really just did their research there. That was just one of those cracking English performances. It reminded me a lot of the semi-final in 2019.
Yeah.
And, it was very, it resonated a lot because they did the Flying V as well at the same time. It just had that same spark of, okay, it's England's turn to win this. But
Mm.
yeah, I still think New Zealand is a massive superpower. Never turn your back on, as we Irish know very well.
Good on you. Thank you for that. It's I'll make sure I send you an all black flag to put up in your background there, because you haven't got one at the moment.
Yeah, actually, it's funny you say that, because I was at the Leinster game on Saturday. They were playing the Harlequins, and of course that was Rico Ioane's debut. And I was there at my aunt. She lives in Dublin. I was like, okay, let's go watch a rugby game in the Aviva. I'd never been there before, and we were right up at the front. And Rico comes on. There's this massive response. With 20 minutes to go, and the people in front of us, when it was full time, they had a New Zealand flag. They came out and they literally got the New Zealand flag out of their coat, and I looked around the stadium. It was like the only people in the whole stadium that had brought this New Zealand flag.
Yeah.
I thought, that's just so cool, and they
Yeah.
were trying to roar at him, kind of trying to bring him over. He couldn't. He was on the tunnel side. We were on the opposite side, so unfortunately
Right.
he couldn't hear us. But it was like, oh, if he'd come over, that would have been such a great snap to get. But I thought it was just so cool. We have these Kiwi fans in Dublin. It's just so random for a club game, just because you got one All Black on it. Just thought it was great.
So do you think the Leinster fans are going to be more welcoming into Rico or Geordie Barrett? Who do you think is going to end up being the bigger of the two for Leinster?
Geordie Barrett is a really hard act to follow. I mean, I think it's because he's got that kind of, well, first of all, his last name is Barrett. I mean, we've got Barrett's just down the road.
Yeah.
He had that infrastructure in place. He'd been in Ireland before with his brothers before when they were younger. I think they did some kind of house swap thing or something. And, I think he just took to it like a duck to water. He was immediately popular, and he was such a good player. And, of course, we keep coming back to that Northampton game. Why was he on the bench? He just had this cracking season. Yeah. So it's a hard act to follow. I have no doubt Rico is up to it. Of course, he has this whole pantomime character thing going on. I'm thinking of all the players, from the All Blacks, you pick Rico. So he definitely had it against him when he came over. But you could tell straight away, like when he comes on, like Gary Ringrose gives him one of those clap and hug things, like, tag team, get on the pitch. You can tell he's already in clover there. I'd say they did have some kind of funny hazing ritual for him just because of the spat he had with Johnny Sexton, but come on, you get over that. We've got an All Black on Leinster, so you never complain about that. I think it'll be a very exciting 6 months. I'm very interested to see how he gets on, but yeah, it's great to just have someone like that just to spice things up. I think it'll be exciting.
Well, there's a lot of us All Blacks fans that are happy that he's gone to Leinster and that he's out of the country for a while, because there's some of us that think that he's past his date. But there's no doubt about it that Rico's been a huge, great ambassador for New Zealand rugby over the years, and he has been a tremendous player. This year wasn't one of his best seasons, and consequently he was seen either on the bench or not in the squad for quite a few games this year. So it'll be interesting to see how his performances go in Leinster and what impact that has on his future career with the All Blacks next year. So we'll have to stay tuned for that one. But it was your first time at Aviva in the weekend, was that right, to watch that game?
That's right, yeah. So I tell people that and they go, really? It's just, of course, the tickets there for internationals are pretty high. So I was like, okay, this is a really good opportunity. Get out of Clare for a bit, go up to Dublin, see the aunt, take her for a game. And because really I just normally go, if it's a club game, I go to Munster or Connacht games, because I also have family in Connacht as well. So I'd be going to Thomond Park a lot for the Munster games. So that was my first foray into the Aviva. It's a great stadium. I guess I was kind of surprised because outside you have that, it's very it's nearly like Waterford crystal, kind of this very modern shape. It looks great. And then when you go inside, it's like Lansdowne Road has never left. It's like, it's just your very normal kind of like granite, concrete blocks everywhere. Get your food, get your beer, go to the seats inside. So I just thought that was surprising, but that's, what you come for. That's the atmosphere of the game. And even though it wasn't, fully sold out or anything, it was a great atmosphere. Leinster supporters, they're very devout. They were everywhere. I was actually in one of the pubs just down the road, and I was on my way out just to the game, and I saw this guy who was sitting on the windowsill, and he had a Harlequins cap. And I was like, oh, hey, how you doing? Good luck to Harlequins. And he was just like, he was kind of surprised, that someone would say that, with an Irish accent. And he was like, oh, thank you. And he's like, have a heart, go easy on us. So it's like, sure. But that was the first time. So, and I hope it'll be the first of many. Definitely want to go to many more between brilliant club games and internationals.
Nothing like it, is it, getting into a big stadium like that and being part of a big crowd. I think that really makes a difference when there's that atmosphere and you've got everybody in there. Get along there to watch one of the Six Nations games. How many Six Nations games are going to be there this year?
I believe it's 3. I think it's the away games are England and France, and the rest should be at home.
Okay.
I went to my first Irish game back in March for the Italy game. It was at the Stadio Olimpica, and that was terrific. The game wasn't great, but the atmosphere was really good. Even just outside, it's just a big party out there. And the Italians love their rugby. Loads of Italian fans just decked out, funny costumes, that kind of thing. So that's a really good one. I'd recommend if you haven't gone there.
Yeah, okay, good. Well, you're talking to us today on the United Rugby Fans podcast show. And of course, as you know, we're all about fans and what's happening around the world for fans. So you did mention something in that last bit about the ticket prices. So how much was it to go along to a game at the Aviva in the weekend?
Well, I mean, this was for a club game, and this was really as close as you can be, right in the dead center of the pitch. So it was really good real estate, and that was €70. And I thought, you know what, that's reasonable if I'm going to be that up close
Yep.
to all these Irish internationals, because we know a huge percentage of Leinster are on a huge percentage of the international team are Leinster players. So I thought this is kind of a way to see an Irish game without seeing an Irish game, because I was still seeing people like Tyke Furlong, Gary Ringrose, Sam Prendergast right up close in the thick of things, Dan Sheehan. So I think it was worth it.
Yep.
International games, of course, that's a different story. Even for the Japan one during the autumn internationals, I saw one for it was like €120, 130,
Right.
and these seats are not good. I mean, these are up in the nosebleeds, so you're kind of like,
Yeah.
it's not nothing.
So you said the stadium wasn't full though. So if the ticket price was €50, would it have been full, do you think?
I don't think so, to be honest. I think maybe because it was the opening game of the Champions Cup, there's probably, the least bit of hype about it, because Leinster wiped Harlequins off the map last season. They nilled them. So I don't think it just got that much traction, even for Leinster fans. So
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think it would make a huge difference.
So is it a talking point though across Ireland, the price of tickets in general, particularly to the national team games? Is it something that fans complain about, or are they quite happy to pay the existing prices at 120 or 30 to get in there and watch those games?
I think it's very mixed. I think depends, but I suppose if you're more in sync with the rugby community, if you're from clubs, if you work for clubs, you're going to get those tickets a lot easier. But for the average fan working an average job in a city, it's a big choice to be putting that much money up. If you're not living in Dublin, if you're down, let's say in Galway or in Clare, in Limerick and Cork, that's you're paying to get up there. You're paying for accommodation. Dublin is not cheap, so. I think it's a mixed bag, but there's definitely discontent about, just the average bloke who likes his rugby or lady, or, just likes their rugby and wants to experience it. I think there's, it's nearly a foregone conclusion that they're not going to try looking for tickets, because they're going to be so much.
Yep.
And it's going to be up high, you're not going to be up in the thick of it.
So is it fair to say it's become more of elitist at that level? Would you put it in that category?
So.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I would.
Okay. You think that's a good thing for rugby? Do you think we should have that distinction between the best, the top players in the country affording that kind of ticket price, or do you think it should be achievable for any rugby fan to get along and watch their national team play on the stage?
Well, that's the dream. I mean, that's what we want. We want as many people from all over to be involved and be able to say, and for not to be such a, a choice that you would really have to think about. It should be, you want to be able to go off on the whim and say, look, can we go and do this for a weekend, a few weeks down the trail? So it's not there. And I would like to know, maybe 10 years ago, was it the same? Maybe it was, but it definitely seems like there's more outcry about it, if you go, let's say on YouTube channels, different pundits, there's loads of people in the comments always, banging that drum about these prices. They're not good enough. It's not good for the game. Fans are getting annoyed. They're getting, fed up. So I think there's definitely a lot to be desired there.
Do kids get in for free up to a certain age? Is that how it works over there?
I actually don't know.
Okay.
I don't know that one.
I got someone sent me an idea the other day from, I can't even remember what country it was, but he said, my wish for World Rugby is that all kids up to the age of 16 get into free games everywhere in the world. And they should be able to just watch rugby up until that age. I thought that was pretty cool, because letting kids
that's great.
I'll never be 16 again, but I'd be happy with that. So going back to what you said earlier, when you're a player and understanding the laws, and this is another thing that fans have a lot of discussion around, is the laws of the game and how regularly they're changing and whether they're fair or not and all the rest of it. I was sitting down recently with a friend who's not a rugby fan, and we're watching a game, and I was saying, I'm trying to explain the laws of the game. And here I am, a guy that's been watching the game for 50 years, and I'm finding it difficult to be able to simplify and express what the laws of the game. Did you find it when you started too, that it was just so complicated to understand the laws of the rugby game?
Well, I suppose, yeah. I mean, I suppose I kind of just took everything for a complete free for all because there's so much stuff happening,
Hmm.
and there's so much stuff that gets let go. I suppose it wasn't until recently that I was trying to go into the nitty gritty about the different rules. But I think there are fundamentals that you can if you're sitting next to someone who doesn't know the game to explain. But it's just one of those games where you just can't get too much information too fast. It takes a few games if you're sitting next to someone who knows, a bit more than you to really uh, to get to grips with it. So I think it's all about pacing. Start small, build big, and there's still stuff that I don't understand. I think I might get one of those Rugby for Dummies books. Really would benefit me greatly. But I did get a book about it. It was more like a humorous kind of quirky book about the rules of rugby, and that was, I'd say, 4 years ago. And I feel like that's already out of date. I feel like I need a newer version of that. So yeah, it's a tough one. But I kind of like it too because then there's always this mystery about calls and why is the ref making that call? What's the infringement? So for me, it keeps it interesting. I don't want to know all the rules, all the laws, because it's just it's like when you know one, three more spring up. It's like it's an ever changing, evolving ball of fire in the air. So you know,
So on that topic though, do you think constant law changes is good for the game? Do you think it's something that's going to bring more eyeballs to the game if people are confused about what's going on? Like take the Chicago game between the Island and the All Blacks, right? I just got off a call earlier today from a Kiwi guy who went to the game and he was sitting next to some Canadian friends that are watching it for the first time. And he said, like, the commentators in the stadium had no idea what they were talking about, right? And they were confusing everybody. They couldn't even pronounce the names
yeah.
of some of the players in the All Blacks because of their Maori heritage and all the rest of it. So that was another thing that didn't come across very well. So that's got nothing to do with the laws, of course. But I'm just saying that is the game too complicated? Are we making it so fans go, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you keep updating the rules on an annual basis, where the devout fans are catching up, that's never a good sign. So, I mean, I think the motivation behind this should always be, from their perspective, people are changing the rules and everything, seems to be how can we make the game more entertaining? Like trying to cut scrums down, putting a clock on scrums, for example. Okay, that's just one example on how to shorten the game. But I just think it just seems to be too many changes every time, and then it's like a ripple effect because then let's say Razzie Erasmus figures out how to circumvent this rule, and then three more rules are added on, so it grows legs. So and you can't excuse me, you can't predict that. That takes time to get used to these rules. So I think maybe in the past 3 or 4 years, there's just been too many rules added on, and they're banging off each other like bumper cars. So I think it's a bit of a mess right now.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. I'm seeing an interesting transition in the game at the moment because do you know what the average age of a rugby fan is around the world today?
Let's say 32.
36. You went far away. So there are a lot of older guys like me who have been in the sport for years and years and who love it with a passion. But now we've got this new generation who are growing up with the technology that's available to engage in the game itself. As a fan that you've been what, 10 years or more? How long have you been a fan of rugby?
A proper fan, I would say 5 years since COVID
5 years.
19. That's when I
Okay.
really, yeah.
So have you seen an evolution in the way that the game's talked about and communicated and all the rest of it in the last 5 years?
God, good question. Talked about as in from the pundits kind of point of view.
Yeah, just from pundits and fans, and there's a heap of rugby podcasts. We're going to talk about yours soon. You've got all the other social media activities that are going on, whether they've been talked about on X and all the rest of it. Do you find it impossible to keep up with it all? Is there too much information out there about rugby?
I think the TMO has definitely made things, I think it's been having a negative effect. I think that is one thing that seems to has just spiraled out of control. That's really slowing the game down. It seems that the TMO is dictating things more than the referee. And that is really not what you want. The referee has to be, he's the guy, he's the head honcho, he's running things. So then I think a really good example was, what's that guy's name? He eludes me. It was in the game during the November internationals where he literally put the TMO in his box and said, "No, that's enough. I've got what I need."
Yeah.
and he just went back to the game. I just can't. It's on the tip of my tongue, but I was like, that's a really good example about how to put the TMO in their place.
Yeah.
I
Angus
just think,
Gardner, was it Angus Gardner?
No,
No.
I think it was a Australian. I think it was an English guy with the black hair.
Okay.
It's a James something.
Doesn't matter. Someone will tell us in the
Yeah,
comments.
but he was just really good at just not being. I'm not going to say intimidated, but not being influenced by the TMO. When he got enough information from him, he was like, "Okay, jog on to the next thing. That's all I need to hear about it. I've made my decision." So you can, it just seems that sometimes the TMOs they're trying to manipulate the referee, and it's making everyone really angry. So that is where I think it's really fallen down. That's just evolved. The TMO has evolved, and it just seems to be more kind of like an overseer of the rules, as opposed to when the referee needs to use it.
Yeah,
okay,
good
use
point.
it and then move on.
Good point. I think you've got a lot of people supporting you on that one in terms of what the TMO's involvement is all about. Okay, time to talk about Ireland's performances this year. We saw them kick off against the All Blacks in Chicago. And the interesting thing for me in that game was the All Blacks were 10 games into their season. Ireland were turning up out of the cold, so to speak, and having their first run. That annoyed the hell out of me because I want to see Ireland up against New Zealand after Ireland's played 3 or 4 games and they've got their combinations working and all the rest of it. Do you think that would have been close to that game if Ireland had played 3 or 4 games before that All Black fixture?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a very bizarre choice to have that game as the first game. I don't know the reason behind it, but you could see they were getting really settled in by the Australian game. So I think they were cold. I suppose the excuse I see a lot from an Irish perspective is the Lions hangover. This was the biggest proportion of Irish players on a Lions tour in history. There's a lot of the team was on that. They've been playing all summer, playing Australian clubs, playing Australia. Of course, they're going to have this hangover. They're battered, they're bruised. So I just don't think it was a fair representation of where Ireland were. And to be fair, they still remained competitive. It wasn't a washout. It wasn't a total blitz. But yeah, it would have been great to see, if it had switched, maybe if it had been the last game instead of the first. I just think that whole game was a shambles. Just, I think commercially, I think it was a really missed opportunity. I think the pitch wasn't in good nick. A lot of criticism online about it, but I don't think it was unfounded. So yeah, it just seemed like they were off the pace. They weren't used to playing with each other. New Zealand just took their time, and then total submission the last quarter. So, and then of course you got that Tyg Burn red card, left a really bad taste in the mouth. But even with that standing, they still, I was happy they didn't get demolished. There's still good bits to take away from that game, but I feel like it was a missed opportunity.
Yeah. And then it was back to the Aviva for Japan, and that was a bit of a clunky game, I would describe it as, for Ireland. In that particular one, I was watching Andy Farrow in particular in the coach's box during that game, and he seemed very frustrated that things just weren't clicking. How did you read that game against Japan?
Yeah, I mean, it was still rusty. I think the first half, you're just wondering, when are they going to score? They just seem to be just, missing things. And then, I think the scoreline really, flattered Ireland. You look at that scoreline, you think that's a win. That's a nice margin of a win. But I never, from experience watching World Cups, I never underestimate Japan anyway. I think Japan are kind of a tier 2 sleeping giant. I think when they are having a good day, they can put it up to the best. I think they're really just an exciting team. One of my favorite Southern Hemisphere teams. They're really kinetic. I'm a big fan of Eddie Jones. He's a controversial figure, but I think the rugby world is hilarious to have him in it. I just love his no filter attitude. He's like the last coach that really says whatever he wants to say. But it was still like they were getting better. They were definitely better than they were against the All Blacks in Chicago.
Yeah.
But I just think, at home against Japan, if they got a good enough record with the last few years, people were just kind of like, okay, when are they going to get into the next gear?
Yeah. Well, that didn't take long to come because the next gear was turned on against Australia. And I think in terms of, that was a pretty impressive performance because despite what everybody says about Australia, I've got a bit of a soft spot for this Australian team because I think once they get all their injuries over and done with and they get settled again, and having players in their team that are not lost to European clubs and all the rest of it, I think this Australian team's going to cause some problems. I think they have one of the best backlines potentially in world rugby, and we're going to see that next year when Tom Wright comes back from injury and Tate McDermott's back in there again as well. But how did you see that game against Ireland? Did you see Ireland really hitting their straps in that game and really starting to get dominance up front, in particular in the loosies, I thought?
Yeah, definitely. I think it was actually the best game they played of the year of 2025, really. They looked so comfortable. Like, I thought Mac Hansen, the fullback, was just like, it was like watching a dream come true. It was a bit shaky. It was like, okay, is he going to do okay in this? And then he goes off and scores a hat trick in 20 minutes or something ridiculous like that. Now, to be fair, I think Australia helped Ireland look really good there, because obviously they've had a really long season. They had the Lions Tour, the Rugby Championship. They got these internationals. They were missing some key players, and I think they're just really starting to get knackered. But there is something cooking definitely with Australia. They really came down to very fine margins in that Lions Tour. Hugo Gein doesn't score that last try at the very death of the game. Yeah. It's on, and they win. They won the third test really convincingly. So, and then they go off and they win against South Africa in South Africa. So, there's some really good things there. There's some really good real lights there for Australia. It's very kind of all over the place. But to give them credit, they've had a long season. But I think from an Irish perspective, it was a very big sigh of relief. I was watching that in a pub with a bunch of Irish supporters, and you could feel everyone was just like, okay, thank God, they're playing a good game today. They just looked really in sync, really good passing, really good flow, really good attacking rugby. It just reminded you of the Ireland of old from 2022, 2023. It was a reassuring game, and we needed that because we have had a very up and down year. So, yeah, I would say it was probably the best game they've played all year.
Yeah, fair comment. And I think there were some great performances in that game. Caelan Doris stood out for me. He was just absolutely exceptional. Dan Sheehan, of course. Hansen with his 3 tries. And it was also good to see Bundy back in there again. He's favourite of mine across the pitch. But talking about the British and Irish...
everywhere.
Talking about the British and Irish Lions, the one thing we've all got to remember about that Lions tour down under this year was Australia had one warm-up game before that first test in Brisbane. And the Lions came into that test series with 5 games under their belt in Australia, right? So poor old Joe Schmidt up against the smashing board again, right? Okay, go and have a demolition derby against Fiji as a warm-up game. Get your number 10 annihilated and unconscious on a stretcher and carried off. And then come into the Irish and the Lions and Irish series with one of your key playmakers out and all the rest of the guys battered and bruised from the first game, and you've got to play the Lions 3 times. So I don't think the scheduling did anything in the favour of the Aussies in that. And I think, I'm like you, I think given all that, put that into context, the performance they put up, there were just a couple of points here and there that they could have come away with that series win. And then they go to South Africa and they do what they did in Ellis Park in Johannesburg in that second half, right? And 60 plus years of history is written away with the Wallabies beating the back-to-back world champions. And all of a sudden we're standing up thinking, hang on a minute, could this be the Wallabies season, right? And I'm like you, they got to the Aviva and I think it was a watershed moment. I thought the whole season caught up with them in that game. I think that's the game where they really started to feel the pinch of what had gone on before that for the rest of the season leading up until that stage. So then Ireland, then you had the back-to-back world champions coming to town. And of course, the hype around the rugby world was like it never is between your two nations. And I'll tell you what, as a Kiwi, I love these games, right? Because I can sit back with a smile on my face and just listen to you all going at each other with all the banter and everything else. And some of it gets a bit pointy, of course, but then we see what happened that day at the Aviva Stadium. And you've got to say from an Irish point of view, that was pretty beastly, wasn't it, what took place there?
Yeah, it was a tough day at the office. I don't know. It was just, it's kind of, I suppose, after 20 minutes, we're kind of in disbelief, and you could tell, this is going to be a really long day. And it's just like, credit to South Africa. They really are just, they're making history as we speak. This is going to be known as one of the best teams ever in the history of the game. So in that context, you're like, well, okay, it could have been 60-0, it could have been a lot worse. There
Yeah.
are positives to take from that game, but just, obviously the scrum, huge, huge worry for Ireland. I don't think it's ever been exposed. I can't remember in living memory it's been exposed that bad, because the theme really for the November internationals before this game was the line out. What's wrong with the line out? Why isn't the line out not working? How does Paul Costello have his job? Line out, line out. And then we get that working in the Australia game and all is forgiven. And then the new buzzword, of course, after that
Yeah.
is what's with the scrum? Who's in charge of the scrum? Why has the scrum been so bad for so long?
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, there were days where our scrum was okay. Now, it's never been the strongest weapon in our arsenal, no. But it was just, the fact that, there was that few minutes where it just kept collapsing, kept going down. This was personal. This was like South Africa are basically saying to Ireland, look how great our scrum is, and we're going to do it again and again and again. So, yeah, it was a humbling day. Look, I think nobody died. I mean, I actually had to step away from my socials that week. I was like, these reactions are really incendiary. Like, they were very alarming, from the Irish pundits. They really went to town. The team was like, you need to chill out, just relax. It was a bad day for sure. But I think it's really good for Ireland. And the fact that this is happening now, I don't think it could be more beautifully timed. It's 2025 now. We're 18 months out, really, from getting to the business side of the next World Cup. Have these problems now. We'll thank South Africa later. They taught us a lesson there. But I'm glad because, you're playing this team. That's the standard you're up against. And, when it happens in that fashion, it felt like it was like a public execution. It felt like, our whole ego was on the floor after that game. But that's what has to happen. I would have actually, if we had won that game, let's say the comeback in the second half went to plan, because there was a comeback there. Ireland really, they didn't give up, given the situation, the circumstances of the cards.
Yep.
If they had won that game by some miracle, I just think that would have made a paper tiger out of Ireland's reputation. And we'd be like, oh, it's okay. We're doing okay. We just need to clean up the discipline a bit there, So I'm glad it happened. There'll be a wake-up call. The discipline was worrying. Just that's a record. 4 yellow cards and 1 red. That's enough to sit down and have a game of 5 cards to poker. That's a lot of cards. So I was just, kind of blown away, because we used to have a very good record for the cards. And it just seems that there were silly, silly mistakes. Obviously, the James Ryan tackle was really worrying, really blatant. There's no room for that. Jack Crowley putting his hand in the ruck like that. I mean, come on. I actually have no problem with what was the name of it? Matthew Carley. And I think if you talk to a lot of Irish fans about that game, can't really disagree with any of those choices he made. He did what he could, those are the rules. He was just following, he's just doing his job. So, yeah, it's a soul-searching game for Ireland, but I think one that was necessary.
The only thing I was missing from that game was a tweet from our friend Matt Williams to Andy Farrell to say, hey, mate, you should be doing this, right, to beat these guys. So that was the only thing.
Yeah, I actually really like Matt. I know he's a popular kind of, he's a bit of a villain. People like to criticize him a bit, but I don't know, maybe it's his Australian accent. I just think it's always in Irish sport, it seems to always be 2 Irish guys and an Australian guy talking about the rugby we've had on RT or something. So but was an interesting day for him to be watching that game. I would have loved to have been a fly in the wall.
Okay, so let's talk about Ireland's players now after this season in terms of some standouts for you. Talk about, give us a few forwards that really stood out for you this year, as well as a few backs. And also, let's talk about the guys that come off the bench, because they're sometimes forgotten a little bit in terms of how important they are. So give us a couple of forwards and a couple of backs and a couple of bench players that really impressed you this year from Ireland.
Yeah, I think, Paddy McCarthy, Joe's brother, he's been a success story. It's been kind of one of the good takeaways from the November internationals. Wasn't daunted at all by the task. I mean, he's brand new, and he really did. I thought he did brilliant. I think it's really exciting to have him as a loose head, because Andrew Porter, he's just put in so much time. He needs a break. He needs somebody to. I think Andrew Porter off the bench is really, it's intimidating for the opposition. So I think Paddy McCarthy should be played more in the first 15. He's a guy that's been great. I think Tommy O'Brien has been really great to look at on the right wing. He's had a lot of bad luck in the past with injuries, but I think it's been his year, from a club level for Leinster and for Ireland. I think he's really he's just so fast. And that grubber kick he did on the weekend against the Harlequins, it was beautiful. That's why we love rugby. That's just why we love the sport. It was just so spontaneous.
It was, yeah.
And, Ireland can be too mechanical. They can be very structured. And you're kind of like, okay, where's the charisma here? He's just got charisma all over him. I think Tommy O'Brien is great. Really excited to see. I think he's going to be on the national team for a while. For locks, it was interesting because, we had... I really like Cormac Kazujuku from Ulster, but unfortunately he was out injured. So don't think, and then you had Joe McCarthy who was out injured. So we looked kind of vulnerable there. We were sticking with Ty Byrne and James Ryan all the time. Like Nick Timoney as well from Ulster, a previous Leinster man. He's been doing great things with Ulster this year. I think more of him. I really like Cian Prendergast in the back row. Now he's been on the Irish team a bit, but I think he still feels like he's a new guy just because that back line is so settled. So it's you can nearly predict it every week who they're going to pick for that back line when all the guys are fit and healthy. So I think need more game time for Cian Prendergast. And then obviously Hugo Keenan is out. So we had Andrew Osborne pulling the strings as fullback. I think he's great and he's such a Swiss Army knife. He can do a lot of things. I think he's actually better as a centre. And we should use Mac Hansen more as fullback for backup for Hugo Keenan. And Kieran Frawley, I think, he's not new per se. He's been around for a year on the international scene, but I think he's gotten a real raw deal. I don't think we've seen enough of him. I think he deserves a second chance. It just seems that he was kind of cast to the wind ever since that bad game against New Zealand last year. And I think he's still got a lot of potential. I think we need to keep him in the mix, keep him in the squad. He also is good on many different positions. So keep him in the back, keep experimenting with him. Okay, so he's not number 10 apparent anymore. That's between Sam and Jack now. But, I just think he's still got a lot of potential. That drop goal against South Africa last year in Durban was just such a thriller. He was the architect of that. It really it saved that series for Ireland. So he definitely needs more airtime.
So what happens when Hugo Keenan comes back? Mac Hansen goes to the wing or what?
I would put Mac Hansen then on the bench. Because he can cover wing and fullback. Why not just put him on the bench? Because when Hugo Keenan is back, you can't see him, and he's in good form. You just can't see him really giving up that 15 jersey. He's been like a goalkeeper for Ireland the last few years. I feel like he saved so many tries, as much as scoring them. So
One player you didn't mention that I think is one of those players that typically plays a brilliant game for Ireland every time I watch is Jamison Gibson-Park, and I just thought he had a brilliant season this year. I watched some of his games really closely and I just thought he had improved his kicking this year. His clearance ability, distance from the exits were phenomenal. He was driving the ball down 35, 40 metres down the field against Australia in particular. I noticed that, and I just thought that was a great improvement in his game. But his speed at the base of the rucks and the breakdowns is what gets that Irish backline away, and he gives Sam Prendergast more time then to decide what to do on the ball. And I just thought Jamison Gibson-Park had a brilliant year this year.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think we take him for granted now. I think he's been world class for years now. He was so essential in that tour in 2022 down in New Zealand, and he's just I think he's up there with Dupont. Obviously, Dupont, he is one of the best in the world. And it's really tough to put him side by side with that. But yeah, he's very popular here. I don't know how he's gonna be really hard to get off that position. I know he's getting a little bit older now, and it's just like just feels like, God, it doesn't seem like he's like in his mid-30s. I still think he just looks so fast. He just it seems like he should be around for a while, and that people are saying, well, it's going to be his last World Cup in 2027. I just feel like he's just gotten started. I think he's only really gotten amazing in the last few years. So I think we're spoiled for good scrum halves, because between him and Craig Casey, we probably need another one coming off the line there. But there are really good scrum halves in our provinces that just need a bit of game time. But I think between him and Craig Casey on the bench, for example, our scrum halves are looking great. Okay,
good. So a quick crystal ball on the Six Nations. Are you going to beat England and France? Is it going to happen?
Yeah. It's a tall order. Away games, Twickenham and the Stade de France, that's tough. But I don't know. I think anything could really happen. I think it's France, England, Ireland. I don't think there's much in it. You would say it's France marginally because
Mm-hmm.
Dupont is now back in the picture, but
Mm-hmm.
England just looks so good, and that win against New Zealand, it was it was very convincing. I think their kicking game is catching up with the trend right now. So it's a tall order for Ireland, but I wouldn't write them off. I'd say they have a chance. Not a I would say 60% if we're using percentages. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. Okay.
But I don't think it's going to be one of those Six Nations that's going to be a grand slam for anybody. I think it's going to be very similar to the one we just had, where like everyone has lost the game and it's going to come down to points. I feel
Yep.
like that because it was so close this year,
Yeah.
between France, England, and Ireland. It just came down to who had that bonus point. And I think that's going to happen again.
Okay. Cool. Now, before I let you go today, I want to tell everybody that's listening in today across the world of rugby that you and I just met recently. Officially, you've been connected to me for quite some time, but we got connected through my podcast show Inside Rugby with Mark, and you reached out to me and you told me a fabulous story that you started your own rugby YouTube channel. So tell us all about it.
Yeah, so basically, just happened really just a couple of months ago where I was just, spitting my usual theories on rugby to a friend, and he said, you really should. I know all the stuff you've told me already. You don't have to tell me anymore. So maybe you should do a podcast instead, and just like deposit your knowledge there instead, or your opinions or outlook or whatever. So I
What
thought,
a top
that's an
bloke.
interesting
What a
idea.
top friend that is.
Yeah, I'm
Shut
glad
up
he did.
talking to me and
Just-
go and talk to everyone else. Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of nudged it there.
Yeah.
So I just said, why not? So and I just said, where do you start? Just something you love, So just been really in love with the game the last few years, ever since COVID, and really starting to get into, especially Irish rugby, just the history, just big players in the past, big games, where it's at now. So I thought, yeah, I'll just put something together, just talk about rugby, have a few topics and go through it, and try to keep it as open-minded as possible, like glass half full kind of outlook. I'm always on the offense for the positivity for Ireland. The better days are to come, that we've more records to break and better things to accomplish. So I thought, yeah, why not just put it out there, just talk about it.
Okay, brilliant. So you're in your early days, and if I can pass on any type of advice from a little YouTube channel that I've got, just keep being consistent and you'll get there and people will come and listen. And you haven't told us the name of the podcast, so you should start off with that first of all.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's called The Rugger. So it is called The Rugger. It's still like, with YouTube, the algorithm, I feel like it's still finding it. So if you put The Rugger URC
Yeah.
into YouTube, it will pop up straight away. So it
Yeah.
covers things like URC games, the Champions Cup, Challenge Cup, international games, and just, like just random rugby news, like, cards, offences, coaches, who's been appointed, big kind of rugby world news. I'd love to do a video on Uruguay now that Ireland has been in the draw with them. I don't know anything about Uruguayan rugby, so I'd love to do a bit of a dive into that and just dedicate a video to that. So it'll be quirky. There'll be a lot of left field topics as well, but just things that I find interesting to do with the game. The World Cup, I just did an episode recently on the World Cup draw. So I'd love to talk about that and the iterations, the permutations. What's the possibility of us meeting Argentina, that kind of thing.
Yep.
So yeah, but it's always from an Irish perspective. How did Munster get on? How did Connacht, Leinster, Ulster? So the provinces, just looking after them on the tournaments as well as the internationals.
Fantastic. So you're not going to have to go far to find out where the rugger is. You're going to be able to find the link in the description of this video. So please check it out. Please subscribe to Nate's channel. Give him all the love and support. And if you're a fan of Los Teros from Uruguay and you're listening in today, then get in touch with Nate and give him some information about your fantastic team, because you're going to do some good things at the Rugby World Cup in 2027, that's for sure. And we can help Nate get a little bit more knowledge on Los Teros and all the things they're doing in South America, because it's a fantastic rugby team and a great community down there. Nate, it's been wonderful having you on the show today. I really appreciate it. It's great that we connected, and I wish you all the best with your YouTube channel. And I wish all the best for the Irish Six Nations campaign, I'll be watching avidly on my channel and reporting back from a Kiwi perspective. But as you know, I'm a global rugby fan first and an All Black fan second, and I'll be making sure that I give a fair assessment of how the Irish are going in the Six Nations next year.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Mark. Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. And it's an honor. I was watching you since, you were way back in the day, under 1,000 subscribers. You were still on stabilizers. So it's great to see where you are now. And really appreciate it. It's great to just have the chat. And appreciate it. And definitely check out the channel and see what you think if you haven't before.
Thank you, mate. So there we go, everyone. That was Nate Reynolds from beautiful County Clare in Ireland, and he started off his YouTube journey talking about rugby. So please get over to his channel, check it out, give him a lot of love, tell him that Mark sent you over, and let's see if we can explode his channel up for him. A great guy talking about rugby in Ireland and also his journey as a rugby player and a rugby fan. And I hope you got something out of it, because I learned quite a bit talking to Nate there across rugby in Ireland today. And let me know also, what do you think Ireland are going to do in the Six Nations? Do you think they're going to be able to beat England and France? Or do you think, like Nate said, there's going to be some wins and losses along the way? That's going to be an interesting one that we're going to be able to keep hold of in 2026 as I cover the Six Nations on my Inside Rugby with Mark channel. So make sure you go and check that out as well. Thank you very much for watching United Rugby Fans podcast show. I'm enjoying these interviews and chats with rugby fans all across the world. I'm going to keep them coming for now. So make sure you hit the subscribe button, give us some love, give us a comment, and also like this particular video if you have enjoyed it. I'll see you all again very soon from right here in beautiful Cancun in Mexico. Until next time, keep safe, keep watching your rugby across the world, and it's time for me to say adios for now. Bye, everyone.